So welcome to the Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. I'm Ward Simmons. I'm tonight's Dharma leader. If we were meeting in person, this is when we would ask you to turn to somebody near you and say hello. But since that's not possible, it's a good moment to just scroll around. Anybody who doesn't have your image visible, maybe you could just for a moment make it visible, and we can all see each other, say hello to each other. It's nice to see so many faces. So I probably don't have to tell you that there are some disturbing situations out there in our world right now. There's racial and economic inequity, and there's the predictable outcry that comes in response to that. There's the COVID pandemic, and there are deep divisions as to how it should be addressed. There's climate change, and there's the associated dilemma of the lives we're used to versus what we need to do to address climate change, and they don't necessarily correspond. Most of these, and there are many others I could list, but most of these situations don't have a discernible end point. But there is one that does have an end point, and it's the upcoming election. And that's what I'd like to address tonight. So unlike many of these other situations, on or about November 3rd, this uncertainty will be settled. Now, of course, that begins a new situation, governing by whoever wins. But that's a topic for another night. So what, you may ask, does this upcoming election have to do with meditation? Aren't we here to learn about meditation? So the practice of insight meditation, of following this path to liberation as outlined by the Buddha, it's much more than meditation. Meditation is one key component, but it relies on and is supported by other factors on the path. And the culmination of this path is the ease and well-being that we can find when we free the mind from greed, hatred, and delusion. So let me say one thing clearly. I'm not giving this talk because I have mastered my relationship with this election situation that we're in. My relationship to the election is on my mind, and it's what's up for me in practice, because it's where I see that I'm falling short. And so I'm curious about it, and I want to improve my relationship with this election situation. And so that's why I'm talking about it tonight, not because I've perfected this. So there are many teachings that we might find useful in our effort, but I want to start with right speech. So you may know that the Buddha's step-by-step prescription for freeing the mind from greed, hatred, and delusion is the Noble Eightfold Path. And just to briefly review that path, there is ethical behavior that forms the foundation on which we build. And the path factors there are right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Then mind training builds upon this refined ethical behavior, and it includes the practice of meditation. So the factors here with mind training are right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Wisdom or insight arises as our mind training matures, and it gives us access to the culmination of the path, which is awakening. And these path factors are right view and right intention. So the ethical behavior factor of right speech and the mind training factor of right effort are kind of what I'm going to talk about tonight. So when we frame our relationship to the election with the teachings on right speech, as I said, we're working with one of the three factors for cultivating ethical behavior. Now, when we hear the word speech, we naturally think about the words that we speak. And the words we speak are awfully important. In times like this, we can find ourselves drawn into making remarks that are not appropriate. But I believe we can legitimately broaden the understanding of right speech and benefit from that broadening. So first, the core of right speech is our actions in communicating with others. But we all know that our communications go far beyond the spoken word. Written words and images are equally capable of causing harm, both to others and to ourselves. Letters, emails, blog posts, and similar writings have to be considered. And what about editorial cartoons filled with sarcasm? In fact, I suspect they wouldn't even be viable if they weren't filled with sarcasm. YouTube videos that get circulated widely, making light of whoever our out of favor candidate is, fall into this same category. And we can go even further. We can move beyond into nonverbal communication. The subtle roll of the eyes or the shrug of the shoulders can speak volumes. And we have to include these forms of communications if we really want to live skillfully during this election season. And for this evening's talk, I'm going to go one step further and include as part of right speech, not just what originates with us, but also the communication we receive, we choose to receive from others. Now, I can't point you to a sutta where the Buddha broadened right speech to this extent, but he did consistently teach that what we partake of will either have a favorable or an unfavorable impact on our mind. Just consider the following statement. This is from the Buddha. Whatever a person thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of her mind. Whatever a person thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of her mind. So thoughts don't simply pass through our minds, go in one ear and out the other, and we're through with them. They leave a residue, and that residue affects us afterwards. And we have to be careful of what thoughts we allow to be aroused. So I had an experience once. I was on a long retreat, and I had this thought come to me of sexual desire. And I was tired. I'd been meditating a lot, and I was my mind was eager to be stimulated. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll indulge this sexual fantasy for, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And somewhere unrecognized in my mind was the idea that if I did this for 5 or 10 minutes, it would take me 5 or 10 minutes to recover. But that wasn't true at all. 2 days later, I was still trying to recover from that indulgence. So this thought that I gave permission to indulge took 2 days out of my retreat. So here's a quote from Bhikkhu Bodhi. Many of y'all heard him when he spoke to us in July. And he's talking about all the ways that we communicate now that challenge us. He says, all these developments, naively accepted as progress, threaten to blunt our aesthetic and spiritual sensitivities and deafen us to the higher call of the contemplative life. Serious aspirants on the path to liberation have to be extremely discerning in what they allow themselves to be exposed to. They would greatly serve their aspirations by including these sources of amusement and needless information in the category of idle chatter and making an effort to avoid them. So this brings me to another one of the Buddha's teachings that I believe is relevant, and that is the path factor of right effort. Right effort being a part of the 3 path factors related to mind training, which is the meditation area. So this factor includes what are referred to as the 4 great efforts, and they are preventing the arising of unwholesome mind states, abandoning any unwholesome mind states that do arise, arousing wholesome mind states, and sustaining any arisen wholesome mind states. So notice the focus here is on awareness of and refinement of our mind states. So again, this is Bhikkhu Bodhi. The starting point is the defiled mind, afflicted and deluded. The goal is the liberated mind, purified and illuminated by wisdom. What comes in between is unremitting effort to transform the defiled mind into the liberated mind. And that's where we find ourselves here in the middle of this election cycle. A lot of what we're exposed to does not move us away from the defiled mind. It moves us toward the defiled mind. And what is called for is this unremitting effort to transform ourselves away from those defilements. So this emphasis on mind states is also evident in another of the Buddhist teachings, which is the Satipatthana Sutta, or the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Some of you know that it's probably the most important teaching the Buddha gave on cultivating mindfulness. And he suggests 4 objects for our use. First is the body, second is feeling tone, third is mind states, there you go, and fourth is dhammas, which is a collection of very specific teachings. So this 3rd foundation of mindfulness, that is mind states, again, points to the importance of us attending to these mind states. So have you ever noticed that when you've had a really lousy day, even later on, your mood suffers? And if we're not careful, we can be short or unkind with others who have nothing to do with our lousy day. I know this happens to me. And this mood is simply an unwholesome mind state. So as long as we're unaware of it, we're at its mercy, and it's whipping us around like the wind. But when we see that it's just a bad mood, and it arose because of causes and conditions, in this case, our lousy day, suddenly we have the possibility of doing something about it. We can apply the needed right effort, whichever of the 4 great efforts is called for, and we can cultivate a more wholesome mind state. So here we are, we're in the middle of this once every 4-year election cycle. And we're subject to so many of these unwholesome influences. We've got TV news and TV ads. We've got social media posts. We've got radio coverage and print media. We've got conversations with coworkers, friends, and neighbors. And there's an awful lot of negativity in there. So going back for a moment to right speech, there are these four essential elements of right speech, and they all seem to be absent. The first one is truth, or avoiding false speech. I don't know about you, but when I see political ads, truth isn't the first thing that comes to my mind. The second is harmony, that is, avoiding slanderous speech. I'm not seeing so much in the way of harmonious advertising for the political season. The third is kindness, that is, avoiding harsh speech. I don't see a lot of kind ads on TV. And the fourth is meaningful speech, that is, avoiding idle chatter. And when I look at the content of what I'm seeing in the election cycle, meaningful information is not at the top of the list. So what are we going to do about this? I want to suggest a couple of things that may help us get through this. The first is to limit the information that we consume. Now, I'm saying this in the context of the election cycle, but I will also say I believe that's a useful, I think that's useful outside of the election cycle, limiting what we consume. For me, I don't need any more information to decide how I vote because I've already voted. Nothing that happens from here on is going to change what I do relative to the election. And since I don't need any more information, now I really have to look a little more carefully at my intention when I tune in to election news or election discussions. Why am I doing it? So maybe there's somebody who's really interested in who I voted for and why. And maybe that's a useful conversation, but I think those are few and far between. And even then, we have to adhere to the principles of right speech. So what other intentions might I have for following what's happening in the world of the election? Maybe I'd like to hear favorable news about the candidates I voted for. But this is just filling my mind with useless information to satisfy my desire. Or maybe I want to see unfavorable information about the candidates I didn't vote for. And that's even more unwholesome because there I'm actively seeking out detrimental comments about other people. So the suggestion is use this desire to tune in to election news and investigate your motives, your intentions. And as complicated as our lives can be, as complicated as they can seem, there is one simple question that can really often pierce to the heart of the complexity, and that is wholesome or unwholesome. And when we ask ourselves that question, often clarity becomes available. So another practice that's really useful in times like this is metta, or loving kindness practice. Many of you are familiar with metta. And in this practice, we're again working with, guess what? Mind states. So we're actively cultivating loving kindness for ourselves and others. Practicing metta for difficult people can be a challenge. So if there's a particular candidate that we're struggling with, maybe practicing metta for that person would be useful, but you don't have to start with the most difficult candidate. You can start small and build. Remember that everybody is just trying to be happy, no matter how unskillfully they go about it. Everybody has a small, scared little child inside. And often, the more objectionable somebody's behavior, the more scared they are deep down. So it can be helpful to visualize this difficult person, this difficult candidate, as a small child, not getting the love and support they needed that would have enabled them to develop into a more mature and compassionate adult. And don't forget to include yourself in your metta practice. You're surrounded by unwholesome influences, and you're doing the best you can. Give yourself credit for aspiring to live skillfully during these times. Not everybody aspires to that. Learn from your mistakes, but be kind to yourself. The final thing I'll say is that now is the time to practice with this situation. It might be tempting to say, well, I'll get back to that when it's calmed down, when it's less challenging. But now is the moment of opportunity. The fields are ripe with material. Anybody can be kind when we're not challenged. So seize the moment, roll up your sleeves, and see what you find. With less than 8 weeks to go, this opportunity will not last long. So I'll offer that for your reflection. And now we have some time for questions or comments. And there are two ways that you can ask a question. If you know how to use the raise your hand function in Zoom, you can use that function, and that will tell me you have raised your hand electronically. If you don't know how to use that function, you can just chat in your question using the chat box at the bottom of the screen. Okay. One more moment and I'll be, okay, good. So maybe nobody else is having any challenges with this election cycle, but maybe I can just learn from all of y'all how to manage it more skillfully. So here's a question. Do you have a good standard response to someone who is very angry about a political situation and you don't want to engage in the discussion? In a different moment, I might give you a different answer, but I think the answer I would give would be something like this. We all know that honest people have different opinions on a lot of topics. And it's clear that you and I have a different opinion on this topic, and I don't think it's in our best interest to try to discuss it. It doesn't feel to me like it's productive. It doesn't feel to me like it's useful. So I don't know. That's what answer comes to my mind. Okay, and there's a hand up. So let me, looks like Steve.
Thank you, Ward. Would you encourage active participation in promoting a particular candidate, or would you refrain from such activity?
Okay. Good question. I would do neither. I think whether or not we get involved in the political process is a very personal decision. I think it involves discernment. If you feel led to get involved, I think you should honor that. If you do not feel led to get involved, I think you should honor that. So I'm not so much speaking to yes or no get involved, but just how to manage it, whether you are involved or not. Your question's a good one, but I don't think it's one I can answer for you. Okay, I think I saw another hand up, but nope. So we got this whole election thing down now. We're all going to have wholesome thoughts for the next 8 weeks. We're not going to watch any bad messages about anybody else, our candidate or the other guys or women. So here's a question from Dave. Is it unwholesome to fight what you think is wrong? That's a great question. I think the short answer is no, it is not unwholesome. I think that working toward what we understand to be right, if I can use that term, I think that for most of us, it feels somewhat incumbent on us to do that. We feel some sense of obligation to do it. And so I think we have to investigate that sense of obligation. And if it comes from a skillful place, if it's fairly clean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's not overrun with ego, I think we pay attention to that. Just a moment. It's important to do it with some equanimity. So that's the challenge, really, to be deeply committed to the values that we understand to be true and right, but to allow for the fact that other honest people have reached different conclusions. And so, we do everything in our power to bring about what we understand to be right. And then we accept the fact that what we want may not happen, and that even what we want may not be correct. So those would be my thoughts. So here's a question from Maria. When one becomes aware of an unwholesome mind state, how does one know if they are applying right effort to address it or are caught up in aversion? So you just put the aversion meter on it, and then you watch where the needle goes, and it's just a simple answer. Not really, it's not a simple answer. I think when we have an unwholesome mind state, we may have aversion to unwholesome mind states. And that aversion we would want to look at and work with. But just because we have aversion to it doesn't mean it's not an unwholesome mind state. So I think we want to apply the tools to the unwholesome mind state as one task. And then if we're experiencing aversion to the unwholesome mind state, I think we want to examine that as a different task. It can be confusing, but as I'm sitting here, that's my response. I would try to separate those two things and not let the aversion interrupt wanting to eliminate an unwholesome mind state. So this is from Denise. Is it correct that drinking games during the debates would be unwholesome? I don't think I can give a useful answer to that question. Jeff says, I've been practicing abstinence from politics, and usually all news for the reasons you stated, that it is full of unwholesomeness and I feel it has no positive value. So good for you. Do an experiment. See what results you get. Is it giving you the result that you're hoping for? And let's see, one more. This is from Martin Jim. Sometimes I think I keep listening and reading, trying to understand. I feel confused by many opinions and actions. How do you deal with confusion and trying to understand what doesn't make sense? Well, the first question I would suggest is it something I need to understand? There's a whole bunch of stuff out there that I don't understand and that I'm not going to understand. And it's not going to move me forward on this path to liberation. So I would parse out carefully my energy in trying to understand things. If it's something that's important, if it fits into your values and you want to understand it for progress on the spiritual path, then I think you read about it, you talk to people about it, people that you trust, you practice with it. This practice is very experiential, so you hold it as an open question in your life and in your meditation practice. And I think most often clarity presents itself over time. Maybe not always. Okay, I think we had better move on. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your attention. We do have some announcements. Starting on October 1st, I try to do these in chronological order. Starting on October 1st, the Sangha is offering a new program. You'll need to get registered, signed up for this before October 1st if you can. It's a Sangha Buddy program. If you're tired of being cooped up with COVID and you want to enhance your practice and have another member of the Sangha that you can kind of develop a relationship with, then to discuss practice matters, then this program, that's what it's for. All the announcements I'm giving you can find on our website, imccharlotte.org. Beginning on the 6th of October, there'll be a 4-week Basics of Insight Meditation series. I'll be teaching that. It's 4 Tuesday evenings from 7 to 9. It'll be via Zoom. And if you are new to Insight Meditation, or even if you're not new, but you've never taken the Basics series, it can be very helpful. If you've been at it a while, but you want a refresher, If you have fallen away from the practice and are coming back, this can be useful. So that begins October 6th. On October 7th, there is a second book discussion group that's beginning via Zoom. It's Sharon Salzberg's new book, Real Change, and Joy Lybeth is leading that. Joy, I'm not announcing the first group because, as I understand it, that one's underway and full. Is that correct? Okay, all right. On the 7th of October, that same day, that evening, that Wednesday evening, we'll have a Dharma leader trainee who will be leading our session, Thea Powers. And I know that you all know Thea, and I know you'll want to make sure to be in attendance on the 7th of October for what will undoubtedly be an excellent talk. There is another series starting on October 20th. This is the Beyond the Basics series. Debbie George will be leading that via Zoom. And it is, the Beyond the Basics series is designed for people who have completed the Basics series and want to move on to more advanced topics. So that's another good reason to sign up for the Basics series if you haven't done it yet. So it gives you access to the Beyond the Basics series. But Debbie will be leading this Beyond the Basics series, and it's Living the Four Noble Truths is the topic of this one. And it'll be 4 Tuesdays skipping Election Day. 4 Tuesdays beginning October 20, but skipping Election Day. There is a Cleanup Earth Day volunteer event. That'll be on October 10th from 9 to 12 at Freedom Park. And the Greenway, it's a chance to be outdoors, to socially distance and still do some good and be together with your Sangha mates. Gail Goforth is heading that up, and you can find her email on the website and contact her. Two more things. One is we do have a weekly instruction period from 7 to 7:30 before this session. If you're new, one of the Dharma leaders has taken time out of their day to be available to help you and introduce you to this practice. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. If we were in person, we would grab you by the arm when you walk in the door and encourage you to go in that direction. But we can't quite do that here, so I'm doing that remotely. Finally, our Sangha is a tax-exempt educational organization. We are funded by voluntary donations. Dana is the Pali word. And if you would like to support this community financially, there's a link on the website where you can make a donation. Okay, and we will close with our loving kindness or metta practice. So you can find a comfortable posture. Close your eyes. And before we begin, I'll invite anyone who has a being or beings that they would like to have held in loving kindness tonight as we practice. Just bring that being or beings to mind, and we'll include them in our practice. And what I will include here is everybody, all of us, all of the candidates running for office, all of the supporters on all sides that feel strongly, all the people who are suffering because they're getting their way or they're not getting their way, all of the suffering around the election experience, I invite for us to include in this process. So I'll offer some phrases. You can repeat them silently to yourself. May I be safe from inner and outer harm. May I be happy and content. May I be healthy in body and mind. And may I live a life of well-being, free from suffering. And then bringing to mind another being or beings, human or non-human, individual, group, nation, whoever feels to you like you'd like to hold them in loving kindness tonight. May you be safe from inner and outer harm. May you be happy and content. May you be healthy in body and mind. And may you live a life of well-being, free from suffering. And finally, broadening our metta practice out to encompass all beings everywhere. May all beings be safe from inner and outer harm. May all beings be happy and content. May all beings be healthy in body and mind. And may all beings, without exception, even our most disliked political figures, may all beings live lives of well-being, free from suffering. Have a lovely evening and a lovely election cycle.